Chapter 2. Archie. Charlotte Finbrook was about to embark upon a journey she could have never dreamed of. She'd arrived at the Pimlico address in London 5 minutes ago, but hadn't yet brought herself to alight the car. She was still staring up from the driver's seat of her city hatchback, in awe at the elegant 3-story terraced Regency building, home to her new boss Archibald T. Montgomery, and began to feel slightly overwhelmed. The self-made woman from humble beginnings was now in a position to influence a nation to elect her new boss as the next Prime Minister. Charlotte had a sharp mind, and at times a sharper tongue, that had a way of getting her into trouble. But straight talking was part of her charm, and one of the reasons she had come highly recommended as the forerunner media strategist, in a bid to run for number 10 Downing Street, a position she had initially turned down. When asked why she rejected the offer, she smiled sweetly, fluttering her eyelashes over her big brown eyes, and replied, "Because I have a soul, and if you think I worked my arse off just so some pompous, soulless ingrate can use my skill and data for their own self-serving agenda, then think again." "Did you get all that?" she'd said facetiously. The messenger smiled, completely unperturbed. "I believe I did," he replied. Now she was one day away from launching that soulless ingrate onto the world's stage. Of course, he wasn't quite the man she was expecting. Archibald T. Montgomery, Archie to his friends, wasn't even a politician. A borderline genius, multifaceted, polymath, humanitarian, successful, charismatic, good-looking, but not a politician. His family name was of old money, but other than his education, Archie's success was entirely of his own making. Determined to write his own passage into history, he served for a few short years in the military, hoping to shed the privileged skin of his birthright. While he may have proved to himself he was cut from a different cloth, he soon realized the futile attempt at trying to escape the past, instead choosing to embrace the opportunities afforded him, with the hope of enacting change. His entry into the political arena was an accidental opportunity after a social media tirade with a high-profile politician thrust him into the limelight. His arguments inspired the digital community to cry out for new politics, for new leaders, and they wanted Archibald T. Montgomery to carry their torch. The accidental opportunity arose from a culmination of events: the catastrophic handling of the H1N1 pandemic that killed over 20 million people across the planet. The global stock market responding in kind, crashing twice within 6 months, the middle classes being obliterated with illogical restrictions on trade and farming, and now a tyrannical overreach of a globally forced utopian agenda they called the conscious evolution. Societal unrest was in free fall. Citizens protested against their governments all over the world, but their desperate cries for help were only met with aggression from police and military bodies. It was quickly becoming evident that democracy had taken an opportunistic turn overnight towards tyranny, and the people needed a champion. Although Archie wasn't one for the spotlight, his name had been thrown around like a rock star savior, as it was his company that developed a biotech smart vaccine, the media hailed as the miracle cure that saved the planet. And better yet, he gave it away for free. The clear favourite to win this year's Nobel Peace Prize, and now with the help of Charlotte, he was preparing to throw his hat into the political arena. For the past 10 weeks, Charlotte had been in what she called a data bubble, spending every waking minute compiling and analysing statistical trends. Now, the night before they officially launched the campaign, the magnitude of it all was finally hitting her. "Okay," she muttered to herself, taking one last deep breath, exhaling with a puff of her cheeks, in an attempt to psych herself up. She collected her worn brown leather satchel, checking its compartments, and finally she stepped out of the car. The square was dark and sparsely lit, unlike the surrounding roads that buzzed with an electric neon haze, as if opulence was afforded the protection of discretion. Just behind her, at the centre of the square, was a private garden for its residents, which was really a small park, and beyond that the adjacent terraced twins, completing St. George's Square. Charlotte felt so small, stood staring up at the building like something from a Dickens novel. A Victorian lamp hung over the black gloss door between 2 cream pillars, bleeding just enough light to fall upon steps leading to its porch. An old iron shoe scraper sat just on the left, also glossed black, and she, a little orphan girl in Victorian London, attracted by the warm glow of light, longingly staring into the window of a world she could only dream of. That was almost true, she thought. Suddenly she was finding it hard to catch her breath. Her heart began pounding like she'd just finished a 30-minute spin class, but not in a good way. She hurried to the roadside curb, quickly sitting down, fearing she might collapse. Several seconds later, warm light poured onto the street, falling around her as the door behind her opened. She hoped it was Johnny, Archie's personal assistant, but was unable to turn around to check, powerless to do anything but try and catch her breath, at this point just praying she wasn't having a heart attack. Please don't be Archie, she thought. Please don't be Archie. Charlotte, are you okay? Archie's voice said, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. His voice was deep with a warm, soft gravel and projected with the clarity of a well-trained theatre actor, along with his touch. It brought a much-needed comfort she hadn't expected. Charlotte turned to him and smiled, nodding as if to say, I'll be fine, just give me a moment, hoping that she would be. But she wasn't. The hyperventilating was making her feel lightheaded. She was confused, trying to intellectualize what was happening, as if somehow understanding it would make it go away. But she had never experienced anything like this before. And now, on the eve of the most important day of her professional life, and in front of her new boss, she decides to have a meltdown. I'm so getting fired, she thought, feeling herself just moments away from fainting. Seeing her distress, Archie quickly stepped from the curb, ignoring the fact he was still wearing his very expensive suit trousers, and sat on the road in front of Charlotte, crossing his legs. Taking both of her hands into his, making sure to keep eye contact, he smiled. Hey, he said softly, you're okay. She nodded along agreeably. Her mouth smiled, but the rest of her face didn't. However, now she was otherwise concerned that Archie would ruin his trousers. Stay with me, he continued. Try and copy my actions. Charlotte was still choking down little pockets of air as she watched him take long, slow, deep breaths, making sure his whole body accentuated the movement. She felt a bit silly, but followed, thinking passing out would probably be worse. His hands were strong and warm, but soft. Hers felt small inside them. He had a cheesy grin, but it was a nice smile, which was comforting. A strong jaw, light smile lines that were beginning to make him look more distinguished with age, and bright green eyes that looked incredible when he smiled, that she hadn't noticed until now, were really quite alluring. Suddenly remembering where she was, Charlotte snapped out of her reverie, finding her breathing was coming under control. Wow, it's working, she thought. Her heart no longer felt as if it was going to explode out of her chest. That's it. Just breathe, Archie said. 30 to 40 seconds felt like an age, staring uncomfortably into the eyes of her boss and holding his hands in the middle of the street, particularly at such a media-sensitive time. I'm so sorry, she said, attempting to get to her feet. I don't know what came over me. But Archie continued to sit, holding her hands, not allowing her to stand before she was ready. Just give yourself a moment. Has anything like this ever happened before? Never, she insisted with objection. She pulled her hands from his gentle clasp and looked around nervously. You need to get inside now, she said urgently with a hint of aggression. Archie laughed as he got to his feet, brushing down the back of his trousers. Feeling a little more like yourself now, he said. But it fell on deaf ears as she had immediately got to her feet and quickly climbed the porch steps, leaving him standing in the road. What were you thinking? She snapped at Johnny as she breezed past, holding the door for her. Johnny looked at Archie, slightly confused as to the role he played. The two men shared a quiet look of amusement as Archie returned inside. They were used to a more reserved company, restrained by nature, formal to the death. It was strangely refreshing to have someone as spirited as Charlotte around,